in the shadows of Persia's mountains, a fortress rose above the clouds, home to an order that struck fear into the hearts of both crusaders and caliphs. The assassins of Alamut were more than mere killers, they were legends. This is that story. The air in the narrow mountain pass smelled of pine and distant smoke. A lone figure moved silently along the rocky trail, cloaked against the chill. Above, eagles circled the peaks, their shadows flickering across stone. The path wound steeply upward, each step a careful balance between life and the abyss. Below, the valley stretched out like a forgotten world, untouched by time or fear. The figure paused briefly, listening to the wind whisper secrets of ages past. The sound of water dripping echoed through the narrow corridors of Alamut's fortress. Torchlight flickered, casting deep shadows and dancing flames across the rough-hewn stone walls. A lone assassin moved silently along these halls, his footsteps barely audible on the cold stone floor. Each step was measured, each breath controlled, as he navigated the labyrinthine passages that wound through the heart of the mountain. The air smelled of damp earth and aged wood, a scent that clung to the very stones themselves. Moonlight bathed Alamut's jagged cliffs, casting long shadows over the fortress. Inside, a lone assassin sat in the dim light of an oil lamp, studying maps and scrolls spread across a rough-hewn table. The air was thick with the scent of parchment and ink, mixed with the faint aroma of incense that curled from a small brazier. Outside, the wind whispered through the narrow mountain pass, carrying tales of distant lands and ancient secrets. In the shadowed courtyard, a lone assassin practiced his blade work under the watchful eyes of his master. The clang of steel on leather echoed off the stone walls, each strike precise and deliberate. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of sweat mingling with that of earth and stone. Above, stars peeped through gaps in the fortress's overhangs, a silent witness to the rituals below. The scent of smoke and spice filled the air as a lone assassin moved through the bustling bazaar. Lanterns flickered above, casting an amber glow over stalls piled high with silks and spices. The hum of merchants and traders echoed off the stone walls, while distant drums signaled the approach of nightfall. He paused briefly at a vendor's stall, his fingers brushing against the cool metal of daggers displayed for sale, each one a promise of power and silence. Night enveloped the training grounds, moonlight carving shadows from every rock and tree. An assassin moved through this wilderness, his breath visible in the crisp mountain air. Each step was a test of balance and will, the ground uneven and treacherous underfoot. The scent of pine needles and damp earth filled his lungs as he climbed higher, seeking not just elevation but mastery over fear itself. Above, the stars wheeled silently, indifferent witnesses to his struggle. The scent of incense and aged parchment filled the air as an assassin carefully unrolled a map in the dim light of a flickering oil lamp. Shadows danced across the rough stone walls where ancient inscriptions seemed to whisper secrets from the past. Each crease on the map told a story of hidden paths and forgotten rituals. Outside, the night was alive with distant howls and the rustle of unseen creatures. The assassin's breath formed mist in the cold air as he traced his finger along the lines that would lead him to his next target. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and cold earth as an assassin descended into the fortress's underground chambers. Torches flickered along the walls, casting long shadows that danced across ancient stone carvings. Each step echoed through the narrow corridors, a reminder of the silence that must be maintained outside these walls. The flickering light revealed hidden alcoves where secrets lay buried in scrolls and parchments, each one holding the power to shape destinies. The sound of water dripping echoed through the stone chambers. An assassin knelt at a small altar, its surface worn smooth by centuries of ritual. Candles flickered, casting shadows that danced across his face, hidden behind a hood. Each movement was precise, a prayer in motion. Incense curled upwards, mingling with the scent of age-old stone and the faint tang of oils used to maintain blades. The air was thick with anticipation, every breath a silent vow. The soft rustle of leaves filled the air as an assassin moved silently through a narrow mountain pass. Above, the stars shone brightly, their light barely piercing the dense canopy overhead. Each step was calculated, a dance with gravity on treacherous terrain. The scent of night-blooming flowers mingled with the sharp tang of pine, while distant wolf howls echoed from the hills. Shadows played across his hooded form, blending him into the darkness that surrounded him. The distant howl of a wolf broke the silence as an assassin paused on a narrow ledge, moonlight glinting off his blade. Below, the valley yawned dark and deep, shadows shifting with each gust of wind. The cold air bit into exposed skin, but his focus remained fixed on the task ahead. Each breath was a whisper against the night, every step a deliberate act of defiance against gravity. Above him, stars shimmered like distant beacons, guiding him through the darkness. The oil lamp cast long shadows over the ancient maps and parchments scattered across the wooden desk. An assassin sat hunched over a scroll, his breath misting in the cold air as he studied the faded ink. Outside, the wind howled through narrow mountain passes, carrying with it distant echoes of wolves and unseen creatures. Each flicker of light seemed to bring the ancient inscriptions to life, whispering secrets only he could hear. The scent of smoke lingered in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp stone. An assassin's fingers traced the intricate patterns etched into a dagger's hilt, each groove worn smooth by years of use and concealment. Outside, the wind whispered through narrow mountain crevices, carrying distant echoes that seemed to warn of unseen dangers. The flicker of a nearby candle cast shadows that danced across the walls, creating an ever-shifting tableau of light and darkness. Each breath was a silent vow, each step a deliberate act of control. The sound of a distant bell echoed through the narrow corridors, piercing the stillness. An assassin stood in the shadows, his breath visible in the cold air. The flicker of a torch cast deep shadows across his face, hidden beneath a hood. He held a dagger, its blade sharp and clean, gleaming faintly under the light. Each movement was deliberate, a silent promise. The stone walls whispered ancient secrets, while outside the wind howled like a restless spirit. The assassin paused at the edge of the cliff, his breath misting in the cold air. Below, the village twinkled like dying stars, each light a promise kept or broken. His cloak fluttered in the wind, carrying whispers of distant battles and silent oaths. The moon hung low, casting silver paths across the flickering torchlight, cast jagged shadows across the rough-hewn stone walls of the passageway. An assassin moved silently, his footsteps barely audible on the cold stone floor. Each breath was a whisper in the air, mingling with the scent of damp earth and aged wood. His eyes darted from shadow to shadow, searching for any sign of intrusion or betrayal. The flicker of light brought alive the ancient carvings etched into the stone. Tales of valor and sacrifice whispered through the centuries. The moon cast silver paths across the rugged landscape, illuminating the narrow mountain pass. An assassin moved silently through the night, his cloak blending into the shadows. Each step was a whisper on the cold stone, a deliberate dance with fate. Torchlight flickered in the distance, casting deep shadows and highlighting the jagged edges of cliffs. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, each breath a silent vow to duty. The cold wind cut through the assassin's cloak as he moved along the narrow ledge. Each step was a silent testament to his training, each breath a whisper against the night. Above, stars flickered like distant lanterns in the dark expanse of sky. Below, the village lay quiet and unaware, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. The air smelled of pine and earth, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke from distant hearths. His hand tightened around the dagger, its cold steel a promise to those who would never see him coming. The assassin's fingers traced the rough stone of the wall, each ridge and groove a memory etched by time. His eyes narrowed in the darkness, catching glimpses of distant movement, shadows that could be friend or foe. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, punctuated by the sharp tang of smoke from a nearby hearth. Each heartbeat echoed the rhythm of his mission, a silent vow to the shadows he commanded. The assassin's cloak blended into the night as he moved through the dense forest. Each branch and leaf was a potential witness to his passage, yet not one rustled underfoot. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the distant howl of a wolf sent shivers down his spine. His eyes scanned the darkness, picking out shapes in the shadows. A tree trunk, a boulder, each one a potential hiding spot for an enemy or ally. A faint breeze carried the smell of smoke from a nearby village, mingling with the earthy musk of the forest floor. The assassin paused at the edge of a cliff, his breath visible in the cold night air. Below, the village lay silent under moonlight, its lights like scattered stars on earth. The wind carried whispers of smoke from distant fires and the faint scent of pine. His eyes scanned the shadows for any sign of life. Each flicker of movement was a potential threat or ally. Each step he took would be a dance with destiny, a silent pledge to his order. The assassin's gaze fixed on the flickering torchlight ahead, casting long shadows across the stone corridor. Each step was a silent promise, his heart steady against the cold stone walls. The air carried whispers of smoke and earth, mingling with the scent of pine from distant forests. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his dagger, its polished steel reflecting faint glints of light. Above, the narrow slit in the wall allowed slivers of moonlight to pierce the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. The narrow stone corridor echoed with the soft padding of bare feet. Torchlight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Each step was a quiet promise, each breath a silent vow to the shadows that cradled him. Above, the cold air carried whispers of distant smoke and earth, mingling with the crisp scent of pine from far-off forests. His hand hovered over his dagger, ready for the moment when he would emerge into the unknown. The assassin's hand brushed against the cold stone as he pressed himself flat against the wall. Shadows clung to him like a second skin, each flicker of torchlight casting his form into deeper darkness. Above, the narrow corridor opened to a slit in the ceiling where moonlight sliced through, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. The scent of smoke and earth filled his nostrils, a reminder of the world beyond these walls. Each breath was a silent vow, each heartbeat a steady drumbeat guiding him closer to his destination. The cold stone beneath his fingertips was rough and unyielding. Each breath misted in the frigid air, a silent testament to the chill that seeped through his cloak. Above him, the narrow corridor opened to a slit where moonlight filtered through, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. The scent of pine and earth mingled with the acrid tang of smoke from distant fires. His heart beat steadily, a quiet pulse guiding him forward into the unknown. The assassin's breath misted in the frigid air, a silent cloud dispersing into the cold. Shadows clung to his form as he moved along the corridor, each step precise and deliberate. Above him, moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The scent of earth mingled with distant smoke, a reminder of the world outside these stone confines. His hand hovered over the dagger at his side, ready for any encounter that might come in the dark. The corridor narrowed, the rough stone walls pressing closer. A faint breeze carried the scent of distant forests and the acrid tang of smoke from hidden hearths. Each step was a silent echo in the cold air, his breath visible as he moved deeper into the shadows. Above him, narrow slits let through moonlight, casting ghostly patterns on the ground. The assassin's hand lingered over his dagger, ready for any shadow that might become an enemy. The distant sound of a stream echoed through the corridor, its gentle murmur barely audible over the assassin's steady breathing. Each shadow seemed to shift and dance with every step he took, as if alive in the flickering torchlight. Above him, moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly patterns on the ground. The scent of earth mingled with distant smoke, a reminder of the world outside these stone confines. His hand lingered over his dagger, ready for any shadow that might become an enemy. The assassin's fingers traced the cold, rough texture of the stone wall as he moved silently down the corridor. Each breath visible in the chill air, his senses heightened by the scent of earth and distant smoke. Above him, narrow slits let through moonlight that flickered across the ground like restless ghosts. His hand hovered over the hilt of his dagger, ready for any shadow that might come alive. The night was a silent witness to his purpose. The assassin paused, his gaze fixed on the flickering torchlight that cast eerie shadows across the stone floor. Each step in the corridor was a whisper of movement against the chill air, mingling with the distant scent of pine and smoke. His hand tightened around the dagger hilt, the cold metal a familiar weight. Above him, moonlight filtered through narrow slits, creating ghostly patterns that danced on the rough-hewn walls. The night air was thick with anticipation as he moved deeper into the fortress. The assassin's footsteps were silent, a whisper on the cold stone. Moonlight filtered through narrow slits high above, casting jagged shadows that danced across the ground like spectres. Each breath he took was a visible cloud in the frigid air, mingling with the scent of earth and distant hearths. His hand hovered over his dagger, ready for any shadow that might come alive. The corridor felt endless, each step a deliberate motion towards an unseen goal. The distant sound of a bell echoed through the corridor, a solitary chime in the stillness. Each step was a deliberate motion against the cold stone, the assassin's senses heightened by the faint scent of pine and smoke that lingered in the air. Above him, moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly shadows that danced across the ground like restless spirits. His hand hovered over his dagger, ready for any shadow that might come alive, as he moved deeper into the heart of the fortress. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and earth, mingling in the cool night. Shadows clung to corners as he moved, his steps barely disturbing the silence. Above, moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting eerie patterns on the stone walls. Each breath fogged in the chill, a visible testament to his focus. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, each step deliberate and purposeful towards an unseen end. The corridor twisted through the heart of the fortress, each turn a calculated step into the unknown. Moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly shadows that danced across rough-hewn stone walls. Each breath was a visible cloud in the frigid air, mingling with the scent of earth and distant hearths. His hand hovered over his dagger, ready for any shadow that might come alive. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, each step deliberate and purposeful towards an unseen end. The assassin's breath misted in the cold air, a visible cloud that dissipated quickly. Each step was measured against the chill stone floor, his senses attuned to the faintest sounds of movement or alarm. Above him, moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly shadows that flickered across the walls like restless spirits. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, each breath a deliberate act in the frigid air. His hand hovered over the dagger hilt, ready for any shadow that might come alive. The distant sound of a guard's footsteps echoed faintly, a reminder that the fortress was alive. Each step the assassin took was measured against the chill stone floor, his senses attuned to the scent of pine and earth mingling in the cool night air. Above him, moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. The corridor seemed endless, each breath a deliberate act in the frigid air. His hand hovered over the dagger hilt, ready for any shadow that might come alive. The scent of smoke lingered, a reminder of distant hearths and the cold night outside. Each step echoed softly against the stone, the assassin's senses sharp for any sign of threat. Moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly shadows that flickered across the walls like restless spirits. His hand hovered over his dagger, ready to strike at any shadow that might come alive. The corridor seemed endless, each breath a deliberate act in the frigid air, a testament to his focus and determination. The corridor twisted through the heart of the fortress, each step echoing softly against the stone. Shadows clung to corners as he moved, his hand hovering over the dagger hilt, ready for any shadow that might come alive. Above, moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly shadows across rough-hewn walls like restless spirits. The scent of pine and earth mingled in the cool night air, a reminder of the world beyond these stone walls. Each breath was deliberate, a testament to his focus. The flicker of moonlight through a narrow slit illuminated the assassin's path. His breath misted in the frigid air, each exhalation a silent prayer for success. Shadows clung to corners, and his hand never strayed far from the dagger hilt. The scent of pine and earth mingled with the faint tang of smoke from distant hearths, a reminder of the world beyond these stone walls. Each step was deliberate, the cold stone floor beneath his feet a constant reminder of the task ahead. The cold stone walls whispered secrets of the past, their rough surfaces a testament to centuries of silent vigilance. Each step echoed softly in the narrow passageway, mingling with the faint scent of pine and earth from beyond the fortress walls. Above, moonlight filtered through slits, casting eerie shadows that danced along the corridor's length. The assassin's breath misted in the air, each inhalation a deliberate act of focus as he moved closer to his destination, hand never straying far from the dagger hilt. The distant scent of pine and earth drifted through the narrow corridor, a whisper from the world beyond. Shadows flickered across rough-hewn walls as moonlight filtered through slits high above, casting ghostly forms that danced like phantoms in the dim light. Each step echoed softly against the cold stone floor, a rhythmic pulse in the stillness of the night. The assassin's breath misted in the frigid air, each exhale a deliberate act of focus as he moved closer to his destination, hand never straying from the dagger hilt. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, each step a deliberate push against the cold stone. The assassin's cloak whispered softly as he moved, the fabric worn thin from countless missions. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, where moonbeams slit through narrow slits high above, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls like fleeting ghosts. The scent of pine and earth carried faint hints of distant hearths, a reminder of the world beyond these stone walls. Each breath was a deliberate act, a testament to his unwavering focus as he neared his destination. The flickering light of a torch cast long shadows down the corridor, dancing over cracked stone and ancient carvings. Each step was measured, the assassin's presence barely disturbing the stillness that clung to the air like mist. Above, narrow slits allowed moonlight to spill in, mingling with the torchlight to create a surreal interplay of light and shadow. The scent of pine and earth drifted in from outside, a haunting reminder of the world he was leaving behind. His hand never strayed far from the dagger hilt, each breath deliberate as he prepared for what lay ahead. The distant scent of pine and earth mingled with the musty air of the corridor. Moonlight slipped through narrow slits, casting ghostly shadows that flickered across ancient carvings on the walls. Each step was a deliberate push against the cold stone floor, the assassin's cloak whispering softly with every movement. His breath misted in the frigid air as he moved closer to his destination, hand never straying from the dagger hilt. The interplay of light and shadow created an eerie dance along the rough-hewn surfaces, a testament to centuries of silent vigilance. The rough-hewn walls bore the marks of time, each groove and crack a testament to centuries of silent vigil. A narrow slit above allowed moonlight to slip through, casting an ethereal glow on the ancient carvings that adorned the stone. The assassin's cloak brushed against the cold surface with every step, whispering softly as he moved. His breath misted in the frigid air, each exhale a deliberate act of focus as he neared his destination, hand never straying from the dagger hilt. The distant echo of a bell carried through the stone, a ghostly reminder of time's relentless passage. Each step was a careful balance between shadow and light, the assassin's cloak barely stirring the still air. Moonlight filtered through high slits, casting flickering shadows that danced along ancient carvings etched into the rough-hewn walls. The scent of earth and pine drifted in from outside, a haunting whisper of the world beyond these cold stone walls. His breath misted in the frigid air as he moved closer to his destination, hand never straying from the dagger hilt. The chill of the stone seeped into his bones, each breath a sharp intake as he moved. Moonlight slit through narrow slits high above, casting ghostly shadows that flickered across the ancient carvings etched into the walls. A distant echo of water dripping in unseen chambers added to the stillness. The assassin's cloak whispered softly with every step, his hand never straying from the dagger hilt as he prepared for what lay ahead. The distant trickle of water echoed through the narrow corridor, a soothing contrast to the tense anticipation in the air. Moonlight filtered through high slits, casting soft glows on the intricate carvings that adorned the rough-hewn stone walls. Each step was deliberate, the assassin's cloak brushing silently against the cold surface. The scent of earth and pine drifted faintly from beyond the fortress walls, a distant reminder of the world he would soon face. His breath misted in the frigid air as he moved closer to his destination, hand never straying from the dagger hilt. The rough-hewn corridor was a tunnel of shadows, the occasional flicker of moonlight through high slits barely piercing the gloom. The assassin's breath misted in the cold air, each exhale a cloud that lingered briefly before dissipating into the silence. His cloak brushed against the stone walls, a soft whisper that echoed faintly off the ancient carvings. The distant scent of earth and pine hinted at the world beyond these fortress walls, a reminder of nature's untamed embrace. Each step was a careful dance with the shadows, his hand always close to the dagger hilt as he approached his final destination. The ancient stones of the fortress whispered secrets as he passed, each step a silent promise to the shadows. Moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly glows on intricate carvings that seemed to watch from within their eternal darkness. The scent of pine and earth drifted faintly, an echo of the world beyond these stone walls. His cloak brushed silently against the cold surface as he neared his destination, hand always near the dagger hilt, ready for what lay ahead. The cold air clung to his skin, each breath a sharp intake. Moonlight slipped through narrow slits high above, casting ghostly shadows that flickered across the rough-hewn walls. The distant echo of water dripping in unseen chambers added to the stillness. His cloak whispered softly with every step, brushing against the ancient carvings etched into the stone. The scent of earth and pine drifted faintly from beyond the fortress walls, a haunting reminder of the world he would soon face. His hand never strayed from the dagger hilt as he approached his final destination. The distant sound of a bird's cry echoed faintly through the narrow corridor, a startling intrusion into the otherwise silent world. Moonlight slipped through high slits, casting ghostly glows on intricate carvings that seemed to watch from within their eternal darkness. Each step was deliberate, his cloak brushing silently against the cold stone walls. The scent of pine and earth drifted faintly from beyond the fortress walls, a haunting reminder of the world he would soon face. His hand never strayed from the dagger hilt, ready for what lay ahead. The distant echo of a bell resonated through the corridor, its sound muted and far away. Each step was measured, his cloak brushing silently against the rough stone walls, tracing the ancient carvings with each movement. Moonlight filtered through narrow slits, casting ghostly shadows that danced across the floor. The scent of earth and pine drifted faintly from beyond the fortress walls, a haunting reminder of the world he would soon face. His hand never strayed far from the dagger hilt, ready for any threat that might emerge from the darkness. The corridor narrowed, the moonlight growing dimmer as he approached. Each step was a whisper of stone and fabric, his cloak trailing like a shadow behind him. Ancient carvings lined the walls, their lines sharp against the cold stone. A faint draught carried the scent of distant pine and earth, a reminder of the world beyond. The assassin's hand never left the hilt of his dagger, each movement precise and practiced. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness, but he pressed on, guided by the silent voices of the shadows. The distant sound of a stream reached him, faint and muffled by stone. Each step echoed in the narrow corridor, his boots barely making a whisper against the cold floor. Moonlight slipped through tiny openings high above, painting sharp shadows on the walls. Ancient carvings adorned the stones, their lines etched deeply into the surface. The scent of pine and earth drifted in from outside, a faint reminder of the world beyond these ancient walls. His hand never left the hilt of his dagger, each movement practiced and precise. The air was thick with the scent of incense, mingling with the musty smell of old stone. His footsteps echoed softly as he moved through the dimly lit chamber, each step precise and silent. Shadows danced along the walls, cast by flickering torches that barely illuminated the ancient carvings. A low murmur of voices drifted from a distant room, the sound barely perceptible over the soft rustling of his cloak against the cold stone floor. His hand never left the hilt of his dagger, ready for whatever awaited in the darkness. The flicker of torchlight danced across the rough-hewn stone walls, casting elongated shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The chamber was cold, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and old incense. A low hum of voices filled the space, distant whispers carried by unseen currents. The assassin paused at the threshold, his hand gripping the hilt of his dagger, feeling the familiar weight that promised both power and peril. The chill of the mountain air seeped through the ancient stones, mingling with the faint scent of incense that lingered in the chamber. His cloak whispered against the rough walls as he moved deeper into the shadows, each step precise and silent. Flickering torchlight cast eerie silhouettes on the cold stone floor, and distant voices murmured like a ghostly echo. He paused at an alcove, his hand never straying from the hilt of his dagger, feeling its familiar weight as he prepared for what lay ahead. The distant murmur of voices grew louder, weaving through the shadows like a haunting melody. His cloak brushed against the rough-hewn stones, each step silent as the night itself. Flickering torchlight cast deep shadows that danced across the chamber's walls, ancient carvings etched into the cold stone. A chill wind snaked through cracks in the wall, carrying with it the scent of distant pine and earth. He paused at a narrow doorway, his hand gripping the hilt of his dagger, feeling its familiar weight as he prepared for what awaited. The scent of aged parchment and leather filled the narrow corridor. He paused, his ear pressed against a wooden door, listening to the low hum of conversation within. Each breath he took was sharp and cold, the air thick with anticipation. His cloak swirled around him as he moved, the fabric whispering secrets against the stone walls. The flickering torchlight played on his face, casting it in shadow and light. He felt the weight of his dagger, a constant reminder of purpose and peril. The crackle of torches filled the air, their flames casting an erratic glow over the stone walls. His eyes adjusted to the flickering light as he moved through the narrow passageway, each step careful and deliberate. The distant murmur of voices grew louder with every stride, weaving through the shadows like a ghostly echo. He paused at a corner, his hand never leaving the hilt of his dagger, feeling its familiar weight as he prepared for what lay ahead. The air was thick with anticipation, heavy with the scent of incense and damp earth. The cold stone floor felt rough beneath his boots, each step a deliberate whisper against the silence. Torches flickered at intervals along the corridor, casting long shadows that seemed to dance and retreat with every gust of air. The distant murmur of voices was like a constant hum, barely audible but ever present. He paused before a heavy wooden door, feeling the weight of his dagger as it pressed into his palm. The scent of incense mingled with the earthy aroma of the mountain, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation and purpose. The distant chime of a bell echoed through the winding corridors, its sound swallowed by the thick silence. He moved with practiced ease, his footsteps barely making a sound on the cold stone floor. Each breath he took was sharp and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth from the mountain heights. Shadows danced along the walls as torchlight flickered intermittently, casting an eerie glow over ancient carvings. His hand hovered near the hilt of his dagger, feeling its familiar weight as he prepared for what lay ahead. The scent of smoke and earth permeated the air as he moved through the narrow corridor. Shadows clung to the walls, flickering with each breath of wind that snaked through unseen cracks. His cloak swayed gently behind him, a silent companion in the oppressive silence. Each step was measured, deliberate, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his dagger. The distant murmur of voices grew more distinct, weaving an eerie tapestry of sound through the darkness. He paused before a heavy wooden door, feeling the weight of his mission with each heartbeat. The scent of incense and damp earth filled the air as he moved through the narrow corridor. Shadows flickered with each gust, casting long, dancing forms on the stone walls adorned with ancient carvings. Each step was measured, the cold stone biting into his boots. His cloak swirled behind him like a silent shadow, barely stirring the stillness. The distant murmur of voices grew louder, weaving through the darkness with an eerie echo. He paused before a heavy wooden door, feeling the weight of his dagger in hand, ready for whatever lay beyond. The cold stone walls whispered secrets of past assassins as he moved through the narrow passageway. Shadows played across ancient carvings, distorted by flickering torchlight that danced with each passing gust. His cloak brushed against the rough stones, a soft rustle in the oppressive silence. Each step was deliberate, his hand always near the hilt of his dagger, feeling its familiar weight. The distant murmur of voices grew louder, weaving an eerie